Oh, oh, it's nice to be home at last. All right, let's cut this thing off of here. Creeps, Damian McDonovan here, Lord Damian McDonovan here, doing another modern movie review. I just got back from a weekend at the Lehigh Valley Horror Sideshow Market, hosted by the New Jersey Horror Con. It's great to see everybody there over the weekend. But there was a lot of talk this weekend about a recent movie, and of course the shade of pink that we got for our wristbands actually reminded me also of a film that I wanted to review that we actually got to see recently. It only just came out a couple of weeks ago, I think, but finally I did get to see the new Color Out of Space, screenplay and directed by Richard Stanley, who most people will probably know from The Isle of Dr. Moreau back in the 90s with Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando. The movie stars Nicolas Cage as Nathan Gardner, Jolie Richardson as his wife Teresa, Madeline Arthur as Lavinia, their daughter. It's nice to see Madeline in something after having seen her in a season or two of The Magicians. I thought she looked familiar, and I had to look it up afterwards. Rounding out the cast, then we also have Brendan Mayer as their son Benny, and Julian Hilliard from The Haunting of Hill House as their son Jack. Also in the cast we have Tommy Chong as Ezra, who is I guess kind of just a squatter living on the property of the farm, and Elliot Knight as Ward, who serves as our narrator for the film. Of course, the Color Out of Space is based on the story by H.P. Lovecraft. It involves a meteorite falling into a small town in northeast Massachusetts near Arkham, of course. Arkham, it's H.P. Lovecraft. And slowly but surely, the meteorite, something comes out of it and basically begins to cause all of the vegetation in the area to grow, but become very odd tasting, so it's not really edible. The animals eventually begin to deteriorate and the family goes mad. And the whole time we have other scientists trying to examine everything. This film, I think, was actually fantastic. To date, I think this is going to be probably regarded as the best H.P. Lovecraft adaptation that we've actually ever gotten put on film. It's actually, I think, is going to be one of my favorite horror movies of probably the last couple of years, and probably one of my new modern favorite films. The acting is incredible. Nicolas Cage actually probably works better almost when he's playing a normal person. It's kind of odd seeing him not be crazy the whole time, because you expect that kind of acting out of Nicolas Cage, but when we get to see him doing, dad jokes or being an actual father, he actually plays it really, really well. I think it's probably some of the better acting that we've gotten out of him in quite some time. I mean, Mandy was insane, but this we get to see him, very toned down. We get some of that crazy later on, and when he gets crazy, it's definitely Nicolas Cage crazy. But we also get Jolie Richardson, who it was nice to see again after doing some kind of Lovecraftian horror from when she did Event Horizon back in the day. Love that movie also. She plays his wife Teresa again. She is suffering with cancer. The whole family is dealing with this drama while everything is happening with the meteor coming down. The acting all around is fantastic, even from like Tommy Chong. Fantastic for what he's doing. He plays kind of a crazy old man living on their property who's kind of in tune, kind of taking like a spiritual aspect of things, but he's also very technical. They make mention of him being like an electrician previously, which kind of helps with what they do with his character, how he's got like cameras wired and everything. And again, Elliot Knight is fantastic in the film. We get to see him react to everything that's going on, but again, I think a little bit where we lose Elliot is a little bit of the narration at the beginning and the end of the film. It's great to actually have H.P. Lovecraft's words committed to the narration like that, and I recognized some of those lines immediately and directly. But I think it may have come off as a little bit slow and a little bit stale when he was actually giving them. But otherwise, fantastic performance. He was great. Of course, the movie opens. We actually get to see Madeleine Arthur doing a little bit of magic herself, not having the ability to do any on the magicians. She's doing a little bit of a ritual, trying to help cleanse her mother of the cancer. She's just out in the woods by the lake, performing like a modern, like almost hermetic kind of ritual. There's actually a question there whether she's doing Wicca or something else. I can't remember exactly what it was. I watched it a couple of weeks ago. Apparently, Mr. Lobo, the other horror host, who's nationally known and is fairly local as well, Mr. Lobo went to the exact same theater I did, and we didn't even bump into each other. It was very strange. So if you're out there again, hello, Mr. Lobo. But again, we see Lavinia doing a ritual, and Ward, who is playing a scientist who's come to survey the land and do tests for the man-made reservoir that they plan on putting in the area. He's doing like tests on water and wildlife and everything, just checking on everything. And it's actually through him that we get a lot of the science explanations for the rock and the color out of space, as it were. When the meteorite hits, it's a great scene. Things go haywire. The acting again, and this is fantastic. The way everybody reacts to everything, the way everybody acts when things start to go south. I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to make this like a full-on spoiler review, although I might get into that a little bit. But Jolie Richardson is fantastic, even when she's starting to kind of phase, in and out of sanity there a little bit. Honestly, Cage may be one of the last ones to go as far as crazy. Although Madeleine kind of hangs on there for a little while. But the family starts to see like strange changes in the wildlife around them. The dogs start to change. The animals on the farm start to change. Things slowly start to grow around the cabin and the farmland with this strange color. It's like, and the great thing about this movie that I really appreciate is that when H.P. Lovecraft describes the color out of space, he never really compares it to an actual color, which, as H.P. Lovecraft is wont to do, he tends to describe things as indescribable, which is, it can get a little old after a while if you are reading him on a constant basis. But here, that didn't really quite work. They kind of went with a little bit of a shimmer, I guess, at first on the rock, but everything that gets infected by the color, and the color itself, when we see it later on, takes on a very bright kind of pink color, one might say. And actually, I'm guessing what this is supposed to be is magenta. And I actually really like that what they went with this. A lot of people are probably thinking, oh, why would they go with that color? It's, it's basically hot pink. But the truth is that magenta is not actually a real color. So the human eye can't actually see magenta. Nothing actually is magenta. Magenta is a wavelength that exists somewhere between blue and red. If you were to turn the entire, spectrum of light around in a circle, this is just what our eyes are, our brain is making up. Our brain basically makes up a color because it doesn't know how to register this exact wavelength. And it doesn't actually have a wavelength, and that's the whole problem. So somewhere between blue and red on the color wheel, the other way, lies magenta. So it's not a real color, and I kind of like that they went with that, because then if it's not a real color, you could say it is definitely the color out of space. It's from nowhere. We make it up. So I kind of like that they went with that. All of the new flowers that tend to pop up, and all of the shimmering begins to take on that kind of magenta hue, and then everything that's growing around it seems to take on kind of this magenta hue before it turns like gray and charcoaly and starts to wither away. It's really great. We get to see a little bit of Thing John Carpenter's The Thing influence in here. It's that, again, that movie is very Lovecraftian, although it's not technically based on a Lovecraft story. But we get a lot of, I guess you would say, practical effects. We get some practical effects. We get some creature melding, I guess you could call it. You'll definitely see that in there. There's a lot of references to all the wildlife starting to take on just vaguely unnatural forms and acting very strangely once this rock is hit. And eventually, at some point, we get the entire family, of course, goes mad, which is it's interesting to see everyone's like different descent into madness, and then when things really go haywire and things really go south, there's like the color begins to take over and emit flashes of this bright pink magenta color, and it's like, you know, it's coming. But they really do some really cool camera tricks with this as well. It's like, not only do we get the color, it almost looks like it almost looks like people's movement leaves like a trail behind them, almost like they're stuck in time, trying to move very, very slowly. You know, it's like if somebody was trying to walk through Jello. It almost looks like they're kind of leaving a trail behind them. It's actually really cool, and I really got a kick out of that. This whole thing, I mean, it really gives you a sense of foreboding. I think it went very, very well. I heard some people complain that things didn't go south or didn't go far enough. Like, they would have liked to have seen more gore or something a little bit more fantastic come of the film during the events of it. But I actually think that they kept it pretty well to the actual story without going overboard. Obviously, there are some changes. For example, the gardeners in Lovecraft's story have 3 sons. Here we have 2 sons, and the oldest is the daughter, Lavinia. And I think that's one of my only real complaints about the film. Is like, I don't know why you would name the daughter Lavinia. Obviously, it's a Lovecraft reference. Lavinia, as in Lavinia Whately, Wilbur Whately's mother, the old albino from the story The Dunwich Horror, which I think they plan on actually doing soon. So I'm not quite sure why you would name the character that if you know that film is coming and in production sometime soon. But I guess it's nice to have another reference of some kind, and it was good for them to change it up a little bit rather than just hearing about 3 sons and not really going anywhere. The Color Out of Space story is entirely a third-hand account. We get the narrator, who in this case would be Ward, hearing this story from somebody else who witnessed it happen to this family, and they never really find out what happened to the family. Here, Ward is like directly involved, and we get to see absolutely everything that happens, and it really is very, very fun. Again, Nicolas Cage's acting is great when he starts to go crazy later on. He really kind of pushes the envelope, and he does some kind of weird accent. I don't know what he was going for. At times, it sounds almost like a Trump impression, the way he talks about a couple of things when he starts to lose his mind. Jolie Richardson. I guess we'll get into some spoilers here. So spoilers ahead. Sorry, but as she starts, when she first starts to go, she first starts to lose it. She kind of blanks out while cutting vegetables for dinner and ends up cutting like 2 of her fingers off her own hand. And it's like, just without almost absolutely no reaction whatsoever until somebody else comes in and sees it, and they rush her to the hospital. And then that's when things start to get weird. The youngest child is drawn to the whispering coming out of the well, which is where the color has gone to now, and he just seems to be kind of almost obsessed with hearing that voice. And you kind of hear almost like a whistling, I think, at some point. And it was great that a lot of Lovecraft stories, especially around Arkham, there's always a constant message of the whippoorwills, like the whippoorwills that live in the area, and you can actually definitely hear them in the background. I love that. That's very distinct. That we definitely hear that. It's nice. It's another Lovecraft reference to get in there. But yeah, as the story progresses, the family starts to lose time. they forget what they were just doing, or they could swear they had just done something, and they end up having to do it again. Like the sheep. Oh, I'm sorry, not the sheep. The alpacas. They actually have a small herd of alpacas. Nicolas Cage thinking that at some point they're going to make money off of these. At one point he mentioned something about somebody eating the alpacas, and it's like he has to be corrected by his daughter. Nobody eats alpacas. No, it's like sheep. You take them for the wool, and that's about it. But the whole alpaca bit hit very close to my heart. I have some friends whose parents did that. They were thinking very, very strongly about getting alpacas in the late 90s of all times. So it almost feels like this trend took a little while before it got into a movie somewhere where someone's making fun of it. But it was fun for me to hear about the alpacas. But they lose time again. Like the son Benny takes the alpacas out, lets them feed, brings them back, puts them in the barn, and then not half an hour later, somehow they're out of the barn again, and he feels like he needs to go take them to feed again, even though he just did it. And even we don't really know how much time has actually passed. We're almost losing time along with the characters. Lavinia seems to take to it and kind of figure out what's going on. She seems to have a general idea that there's something going on, something is very bad. They all need to get out of there, and things just go to crap. And she starts to lose it too. In fact, she's with her magical study, she's got a copy of the Necronomicon, and she like later on, as she's losing it, decides to perform a ritual out of the Necronomicon for protection for the family and herself, and she ends up carving runes and spells and sigils all over her body in order to protect herself. My problem with this, and this is a nitpick, is that the Necronomicon that they're using is clearly the Simon Necronomicon, which was printed originally, I think, in the 70s, which actually has almost nothing to do with Lovecraft's Necronomicon. And it's very distinctly the Simon Necronomicon. It's a very iconic cover, just plain black with like the white sigil on it, and just says Necronomicon. But it's definitely not Lovecraft's Necronomicon. It's a very different book, just like the Necronomicon from Evil Dead. The Necronomicon Ex Mortis from the Evil Dead series is not Lovecraft's Necronomicon. Although a lot of they all do get kind of confused a little bit here and there, but no, it was great. She carves like sigils all over herself for protection, and then she comes downstairs, and even Nicolas Cage is like, "What did you do to yourself?" And then Ward is there, trying to get the family out, and Ezra. We don't really see much of Ezra. We meet Ezra kind of in the beginning, and then we see him again later on. There's reference to his cat, I think, with a bell on it, which we see later on is like in a large lump of like amalgamated different creatures, which have all kind of like melted together, and we see the bell. It's like, oh, okay, so we know what happens to the cat. Great. But we never really see the dog after the dog disappears from the family. But Ezra, we definitely get to see Ezra. Ezra is like drinking the water from the well, and that's like all he drinks. And he's making a lot of teas and stuff out of it for himself. He's definitely one of those kind of hippie-ish layabout loners living out in the woods. But we get to see like Ezra's final fate, and it actually is really, really cool effects where he's like completely grayed out, like the body is like aged and decrepit, and it begins to crumble away from like the middle of the forehead as the color, the actual like the magenta color, begins to slowly kind of emanate and seep through the skin and the bone and everything as he's crumbling away. And they do a lot of really cool camera tricks. There's a lot of times where it feels like something is moving, but it almost looks like there's nothing there. It's almost kind of like that, like the invisibility, almost like that the Predator has in the Predator films. But there's always sometimes kind of a little bit of a shimmer to it, and we end up with like that the magenta coloring. But towards the end of the movie, everything goes south. Pretty much everybody dies. We end with the Lavinia basically standing in front of the well, having pretty much given herself over to it. The sigil carved into her forehead starts to glow, and as Ward like touches her, we get this vision of like this other world where this this color, this entity that we can only call the color, is basically from, and it's entirely this nightmarish, like surreal hellscape of various colors, and like almost, it is almost indescribable. It's as close, I think, as we can get. It's a zoom in, and then we get all kinds of figures, almost look like maggots crawling on the ground in great piles, but they're all like this dark kind of reddish magenta color, or like dying out in gray, and like we zoom into like this monolith, and at the top of it is basically the sigil that Lavinia's carved into her forehead, and it begins to glow, and Ward just is out of there, and it feels like everything that they kind of set up in the film definitely came back, like towards the end. Every little detail, everything they talk about, every kind of mention, it didn't feel like there were really any kind of like plot holes or anything here at this point. And Ward like just runs for it. He runs and gets into the house and gets into the wine cellar for the building, where he like barely survives the color, finally like taking over like the entire property and just blasting like up into the sky. It's all, I mean, obviously it's all special effects, you know, it's all digital and computer animation, as opposed to some of the practical effects that we got earlier in the movie, but it's absolutely beautiful. This is like some of the best effects work, and the cinematography for this is actually really, really spot on too. I really love what they did with a lot of the color correction to really make like all the colors pop, not just the magenta, but all of the colors like pop. The greens are really green, like everything looks absolutely beautiful. And then when we get the actual bright pink color, which you don't really see from anything else in the film, it's just the color. It really stands out, and that color like just takes off. Absolutely fantastic. Ward is, of course, a completely changed man afterwards. I totally forgot. The spoiler again, of course. Jolie Richardson, at some point in the film, Jolie Richardson is trying to rescue the young son Jack from whatever is coming out of the well, because it's starting to emanate in pulses, and they Jack and Teresa actually get fused together into one horrific monstrosity of a being. Although I think they may have lingered on it a little too long at some points, because the practical effect that they used for it in some lighting became just ever so slightly, I think, comic at some points. But it was a nice difference than just the Lovecraft story version, where the youngest and the wife just kind of go crazy, and they get locked into separate rooms in the attic, and they just yell at each other back and forth. We didn't really have time to see like a full, like, weeks, months, year-long descent into madness for this movie. But it was nice that it was, you know, basically only a couple of days, or at least we think it was only a couple of days, again, because we lose a lot of time with the characters. But to see the differences that they made, it felt right. It was eerie. It was gross. It was disgusting, and it was fantastic. But they eventually, everything just gets burned up when the color goes off, and it was a fantastic movie altogether. I would say if you can find it at this point, I think it's out on digital now, because I believe they have released it as such very shortly after it premiered in a couple of movies. Definitely check it out. I intend to go get it myself. Again, so Color Out of Space, fantastic. Go see it. Absolutely one of the best Lovecraftian films I think we've gotten so far. The best Lovecraft adaptation that we've gotten. I just want to give a shout out to everybody that was at the horror convention, the Sideshow Horror Market this weekend. Great to meet everybody. We look forward to seeing you soon. I actually plan on doing more videos soon. Within the next week or so, I think I'll probably release a review of Velvet Buzzsaw, which is a horror film about pretentious artists saying and doing pretentious things and screwing each other over, with a little bit of a supernatural horror element into it as well. I'll release that that review soon. But we're also gearing up for season 2 of Damian's Dreadfuls starting May. I'm hoping to do one episode every 2 weeks as opposed to one episode a month, and hopefully that'll take us right on into Halloween. Of course, with special episodes during Thanksgiving and Christmas again. So looking forward to seeing everybody at future conventions, and don't forget to pay attention and watch for season 2 of Damian's Dreadfuls. Uh-oh, that's not good. Oh, I hope that bloody color didn't follow me here. Those pink ribbons they gave us, that was... Shoot. Okay, then. Well, I think I'm gonna have to take care of this. So I'll let you guys go. I'll catch you later.